Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Macomb at Chandler Park, where they're getting ready to celebrate General Alexander Macomb's 231st birthday. Now, I can't tip this much because I sure don't want to slide the general's cake off his platter here, but that shows you how serious they are. The Western Illinois Museum here got Neiman's a photograph of the general, and they digitized it and put it on the cake, and they're celebrating it for the second straight year in a row. So we thought this was a good way and a good reason for us to come to Macomb and learn out more about General Macomb and why Macomb is named after him. Sue Scott, it's kind of unusual for a community to have a birthday party for somebody that never lived in the community.
That's right.
But you are named after General Macomb.
That's correct.
And what's the tie-in?
The tie-in is, you think about the period and the time. So Macomb was a general of the War of 1812, and he became a hero because of the Battle of Plattsburgh, which was fought September 11th of 1814. And the story goes, it's a great story.
Now that's in New York, right?
It was in New York. He never really has come to Macomb, but I think it goes to show the sentiment of how much he was, the battle was kind of, it made the country, very ecstatic. It was, anyway, the story goes that he's outnumbered. He knows the British are coming. They've got, 1,500, 10,000 men coming. He's got 1,500. So Macomb is totally outnumbered. He's got to figure out how he's going to fight this battle. He is raised and trained in the Corps of Engineers at West Point. That's where he comes up through the military. And because of that training, he has a keen understanding of roads and bridges. So what he does is he directs his men to take the roads, move them around so that they're directed away from the forts, change the signage and things like that. He outsmarts the British, and he basically wins the battle. They become sort of sitting ducks for the Americans at that time.
So they don't know it, but they're utterly confused. They're going to the wrong place. He gets them sort of into a bottleneck, so that the Americans can just have their way with them, even though they're outnumbered 10-1.
Exactly. So it's a great story,
Wow.
and the country falls in love with his intelligence and his cunningness in winning this battle. And the consequences of that is that there's a battle going on at the same town being fought by Commodore McDonough, who is the name of our county where Macomb is situated. And this sort of keeping these British troops occupied and confused allows the Lake Champlain battle that McDonough's fighting to win. He doesn't have any backup troops. The British don't have any backup troops. So McDonough, wins his battle. And it's decisive for the War of 1812 because the war is at a stalemate. No one is really winning. Everybody's kind of tired and they want the war to end. And they're about ready to enter into negotiations for a treaty. And this gives the Americans sort of the upper hand in that treaty. So it's a very decisive battle.
So tell me, how did you're the director of the museum.
Yes.
How did the Western Illinois Museum and the city itself and these various entities get together for this idea of having a birthday celebration for the founder?
Well, it's a great story, first off, and it's like, again, Macomb never was here, so how did we get this history? What tie-in is it? So it really leads us into looking at how we were founded. And when the founders of our town in 1830 went to the state of Illinois to petition to become a city, they wanted to be called Washington. And the state of Illinois, and they're in, like they are now, they make up their own mind, and they basically said, no, you need to be named after this hero of the War of 1812. We want you to become Macomb, the city of Macomb. So that is the tie-in, and that sets in motion land grants and the military track, and starts deeding those soldiers, the soldiers of the War of 1812, to get land, and so that starts to put in motion the development of our area. So we came up with this idea so people could understand this a little bit and be proud of what we're named after and understand where we were born, so to speak.
And so General Macomb was born 231 years ago.
That's right.
This month, this day?
Yes.
This very day?
This very day.
Okay, the
April
day we
3rd.
stand here. Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Well,
That's
terrific.
it.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Enjoy the party.
Thank you. Well, Eugene Watkins, good of you to come down from Fort Madison and celebrate General Macomb's birthday.
No, it's our pleasure.
You probably up at Fort Madison didn't know General Macomb. He was a war hero, but not there, right?
Right. Yeah. Macomb, the soldiers here probably had no idea who he was and would have never heard of him. This was an older regiment, 1st Infantry, and so they spent most of their time on the frontier. And any of the eastern stuff would have basically come as rumor to these guys out here.
And boy, that news took a long time to reach anybody,
Yes,
didn't
it did.
I mean, I imagine some point you were the farthest point west, I assume, during the War of 1812.
At least on the upper Mississippi. There was a factory post out near where Kansas City is today, Fort Osage. But yeah, otherwise up this far, this Fort Madison was the furthest thing out here.
Fort Madison is a recreation of the old Fort Madison.
Yes.
And you are the site manager there. It's a historic site run by the city of Madison, Iowa.
Yes.
But it's interesting. People could come by there, just drop by there almost any time and get a flavor of what the old Fort Madison would have been like.
Right, right, yes. Our season will be opening up here very shortly, and that's it.
You don't go to work like this, though, do you?
Yes, I do. Every day. Once our season gets underway, really underway in May, it's Tuesday through Sunday, and we wear this stuff. That's why my uniform's starting to look worn.
Well, now okay, so what rank would you have been at Fort Madison?
This is simply a private's uniform. And this would be the 1812 model, which this particular coat, we don't know that they ever actually issued at the fort, but it looks very much like the ones they did have. And all the white and pewter just signifies that we are infantry soldiers. During this time period, rank is designated by epaulets on the shoulders. And so since I have none, I am just simply a private.
All right, you haven't reached a rank yet. You're just an enlisted guy, and you're just waiting for your first promotion, I guess. Huh?
Exactly.
Would this be standard issue?
Yes. This particular weapon is a reproduction of a French contract musket. And this is what Napoleon's men were actually using in Europe at this time. But yes, it's a flintlock smoothbore musket, 69 caliber. You have one shot. The cartridges were just a paper tube. Now these are blanks, but they'd have a lead ball in the bottom here and usually 3 buckshot. And you had to have at least 2 to 4 teeth to be in the service during this period because you have to bite them open.
Oh, man.
So when you're standing in line, you have one hand available, you'd bite it open. You'd have to prime the weapon here, close the frizz and load the rest through the muzzle. I will put this away so I don't blow up. But when you fire this, then you have your flint here in the hammer, and it would just, well, it didn't spark, but it would create sparks, which would ignite your priming powder, and that's what would set it off.
And then the ball flies out. Huh?
Yep.
Okay. Were they accurate?
Not really.
No.
The fort indicates that one of the soldiers did manage to kill a hostile Winnebago warrior at 25 paces away. So that's literally 25 steps. That's about all you could hope for as an individual to hit somebody that you were shooting at. Beyond that, it was, pretty much luck.
At Fort Johnson, there wasn't a lot of war going on there, was there? I mean, it was obviously founded to be a fort in anticipation of war, but I mean, y'all weren't really seeing that, were you?
Well, we did have quite a bit of fighting around the fort. Beginning in 1812, there was about a month-long loose siege in March and early April of 1812. Winnebago killed 2 of the enlisted men, and a number of those warriors were shot. Our big siege occurred in September, and it was part of a huge offensive set up by the Shawnee war leader Tecumseh. They hit Fort Madison, Fort Harrison, which stood near where Terre Haute, Indiana is today, and Fort Wayne on the other side of Indiana, all within hours of each other on September 5th.
Well planned then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was meant to drive America. This was the front line for the American defenses, and it was meant to drive the Americans south below the Ohio River. And fortunately for us, not only was there stubborn defense at all these forts, but the English signed an armistice behind Tecumseh's back and withheld everything he needed to carry it out, so the whole thing collapsed. But there's additional fighting in 1813. Some of it we're still trying to track down. There are indications that we may have had other soldiers killed, but in the end, of the 18 or so soldiers that are still buried somewhere in the area of where the fort stood, about half of those men were killed in action during the War of 1812. So it's kind of interesting to have soldiers killed in a foreign war in Iowa. But that's kind of the way it went.
This is one of the examples that you have here of what do you have, 2 or 3 cannons there?
We have 2. One's a Civil War gun, and this is a reproduction of a War of 1812 era 6-pound field piece.
Yeah. 6 pounds meaning it would fire a 6-pound ball?
Yes, the ball would be.
So this is probably a little big, right? For this particular. But this feels like it weighs about 10, maybe 9 or 10 pounds.
Yes.
And you can see that it probably wasn't fired by this.
Right.
But it would have looked like this, right?
Yes. And to fire it then, they had pre-made cartridges like we have for the musket, and on the ball you would have a wooden sabot fastened to it, and then they would sew a bag of powder to that. So you'd have a pre-made cartridge that you would slide in. And then I'll
hold it.
And then you've got the ramrod here. This end was used as a sponge staff. It would be dipped in water to run it to make sure there were no sparks. The other end is your ramrod. It would work basically like the musket. You'd have to push the charge down every time you wanted to fire it. Amazingly, according to one of the drill manuals I have, in tests they did before the War of 1812, they claimed they got, I think it was 15 rounds out of one of these in less than a minute. And how that is possible, I have absolutely no idea.
Now, how far would one of these fire?
Oh, somewhere between 800 and 900 yards through the air, and then once it hit the ground, it would bounce for, I don't know, another 300-400 yards possibly, and it'd smash through things. They were very deceiving because they moved so slowly you could see them, and the soldiers thought they could catch them or stop them, and it would kill them.
Yeah.
The other round that this did fire was basically a big shotgun shell. It's called canister. It was in a tin can, and it would generally have 6 pounds of iron or lead balls in it, and they would spray out in front when they fired it. It was very effective against massed infantry, not so much against natives.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you'd have to have the enemies in a bunched up in a bunch for this to be effective.
Correct.
Because, like you said, they could see it coming.
Right.
Now, it could take a bad hop or something, and you think you're out of the way, and it could get you. But
Exactly.
you'd have to be in a place where you really can't get out of the way. Right?
Exactly.
And then it's effective.
And and so that's why it was not used a lot at the fort. They had little howitzers whose tubes were only about so big that fired shot a little bit smaller than that actually exploded. They were like little hand grenades. That was useful, but this not really, not against natives.
What happened to Fort Johnson?
Fort
Fort Johnson's here in Warsaw. Right. I'm sorry, Fort Madison.
I can tell you about Johnson. Fort Madison, they eventually just ran out of rations, and it had mostly to do with corruption on the part of the contractors. I have letters showing that by early 1813, they had fallen so far behind in supplying the contracts for the Army that people in St. Louis were hoarding the food and raising the prices because they knew they were going to need it. Well, the ration contractors couldn't make any money off of it, so they started sending up all kinds of substandard rotten meat, moldy flour. Most of the rations were dumped in the river, and by November of 1813, the garrison was forced to burn the entire facility down and return to St. Louis because they had nothing left to eat.
Jeez. Well, thanks for bringing this down, and thanks for the visit, too.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, it's kind of unusual for a city to hold a birthday party for its namesake, like Macomb's doing, but I guess this is the second year.
It is.
And it's a cool thing to do, isn't it?
Well, Macomb has a rich history, and we have a tradition of celebrating our history, and I think this goes hand in hand with it. When I came into office a couple of years ago, I wanted to follow that had been laid out for me, this pattern of celebrating our history, and we thought, I tell you, when it came to be underscored for me, we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And suddenly the coincidence was uncanny, in that what made our namesake famous was a battle he fought and won in 1814 on September 11th. And
I didn't know that same
that
date.
connection.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And I said, we need to celebrate something in a little more positive way around 9/11. Not that we would ever want to forget about the tragedy in New York, but we need to embrace that. And that's what we did. That's what we've done. Partnered with the library, the Western Illinois Museum here as well, in my office. And we just think it's a great opportunity to have some fun in the spring and get kids enthused about how our city and county got their name. And they both were heroes of the War of 1812. And of course, you know the history as well as anyone. This land was deeded to veterans of that war by the Monroe administration. And that's how our area of the country got settled. He was not a native of this area. He's born in 1782 in a place far from here, really. But and out of embracing our connection to the veterans of the War of 1812, took on his namesake as our community's name. So a great opportunity for us to get together and celebrate a long history of, so often people travel to Europe and think about history in a perspective of 700 and 800 years. We're still a young nation, but and it's really important that we not forget our roots.
Yeah.
So.
Later on in this program, we're going to talk more about these military tracts of land,
Exactly.
and of course all over McDonough County there were these military tracts that were given away as part of their service, and we'll find out how that helped to form the history of Macomb and McDonough County. But in the meantime, pretty soon here there's going to be a celebration starting up, and I understand you're going to have some school kids coming.
That's our hope.
And
We put out the call to all the elementary schools in the community. We have the Daughters of the American Revolution going to be part of our party here. Ukulele Macomb is going a little local group of musicians. They'll come and help us sing Happy Birthday, and it'll be a really fun time. And again, it's underscoring the positive aspects of our history here in the community.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you for covering this. Appreciate it.
Dr. Robert Welch, you helped put up this exhibit here at the Western Illinois Museum about the military tract. And it's a good tie-in with what we're talking about here today, because we're celebrating General Macomb's birthday. And even though he never set foot in this part of the state, his heroism at the War of 1812 had a lot to do with what happened in Illinois later on. And this military tract is very interesting because people may not know that almost all of McDonough County was given away to soldiers, wasn't it?
Absolutely. One of the missions we have here at the Western Illinois Museum is to tell the story of the military tract and the people that settled it. This is, the military tract is, in essence, a pension system for soldiers of the land, for soldiers of the War of 1812. What they do is, the country has a lot of land. We have almost no money during that time period, and so to take care of our veterans of that war, after the land is surveyed, we set up a system to give that land away to veterans, ideally for them to settle that land, but in most cases, the veterans use that as a source of liquid assets. They sell that for cash.
So they're not required to go out and farm it, and it's not like the Homestead Act where a person is buying that land or is being granted that land so they will farm it. It's theirs to do with what they want, right?
Absolutely. What we found in our research, and especially the research of Marty Fisher, who's a volunteer here at the museum who has done an extensive amount of work on the tract, is almost all the land, we cannot actually find a single record of a single veteran of the War of 1812 who is granted land in McDonough County who ends up moving here. All of that land that's given away is actually sold. Yeah. It's sold in the 1840s and the 1850s when these are old men. Yeah. And even if they're selling this for pennies on the dollar, pennies an acre, that's cash assets in their pocket that can take care of them in their old age.
Yeah, yeah. Well, by then they would need the money. Absolutely. I mean, they're probably, there was no Social Security. I imagine by then, they had worked and they had stopped working and they needed the cash. This is interesting because this is McDonough County here. McDonough County is almost perfectly square, or maybe it is perfectly square. It looks like it is. It's made up of sections. These are the sections that make up McDonough County, and the map below it shows the military well, each X is 160 acres, is that right? So you can see by the concentration of that it's almost all military tract, isn't it?
Absolutely. The only white spaces that we have in the lower map, section 16 section 16 of every township is required to be set aside for the support of schools. And also, one of the things in the laws that established the military tract, the land had to be farmable. There was originally a section of land set aside in Michigan for a similar military tract. When it was surveyed, almost none of that land was of any use for farmers. So they transferred an equivalent amount of land to be given away here in Illinois, here in the tract. This section here in the southwestern corner of the county, this is, if you correspond this with the original survey map, it's a heavily wooded section of the area that is not actually able to be farmed. So this is land that the white spaces were not given away because it's too densely wooded.
Yeah, yeah, and you couldn't expect, nobody could get in there and farm it. I mean, you'd have to deforest it first, and it may have been too hilly too. But McDonough County is a really great example of land that you could, if the soldier had willed to, go right in there, bust it up, and start making a profit farming, or at least feed his family.
Absolutely. If they would have come in their youth, if they would have come very shortly after service, most of these men were given the land between 1818 and 1825. If they would have come in that period of time when they were still in their 20s or 30s, they could have made a viable living and established a farm here. But by the time most of these men are considering the use of the land, they're in their 40s, their 50s, or their 60s even.
Yeah, yeah. And back then, 60 was pretty old, wasn't it?
Absolutely,
pretty old guy. You also have some. I'm not sure if this is an original or a copy, but this is what it would have looked like when a soldier was granted 160 acres by the government. What is this document called?
This is a land grant or a land warrant. This is a copy. The originals are actually that nice, heavy sheepskin document. It's meant to be a permanent document to establish a government-recognized ownership of the land, because with this document, it's not just that they're giving the land to the veteran. It also makes clear that this is the land of his heirs or his assignees. The veteran could draw the land and give it to somebody else to use. So this is, this is one of those official government documents meant to permanently transfer land and to be kept as proof of such.
Okay, and I also like this because it has James Monroe, President James Monroe's signature on the bottom right, and you can actually make that out very clear that he signed each one of these, or I guess he personally signed them.
He did.
He did.
From what research from what research I've found, the last president who actually signed these land warrants was Andrew Jackson, and by the Jackson administration, we have a mix of secretarial signatures and Jackson's handwriting. But prior to that, these were all individually hand-signed by the president.
Wow.
The president, it was not as busy then as he is today.
Yeah.
So he had the time to do something like this.
Yeah. And you have some other documents here, and I guess these actually speak to the fact that this land was given to them for whatever they would want to do with it, because you have records of some of this land being sold as well.
Absolutely. This document is an affidavit from the state of Connecticut. It was lent to the Western Illinois Museum by one of our volunteers and members. It's actually got a great story behind it. It deals with a man by the name of Eber Holden. And Mr. Holden, in his 20s, enlisted in the 25th Connecticut Infantry Regiment. He served in the invasion of Canada, fought at the Battle of Niagara Falls, fought in some very, very major engagements in that campaign. And his regiment was so decimated, it became part of the 6th U.S. Infantry Regiment, part of the regular army. And that's important because the only veterans who received land in the military tract were part of the regular army. You had to serve the national government in order to receive national lands. Mr. Holden left the service in 1818, and in March of 1818, almost just over, well, too long to say right now, within 3 months of him leaving the service, he filed with a representative to receive his veteran land warrant. And he received land just northeast of Good Hope here in McDonough County, received that in June of 1818. And from what we can tell, he maintained ownership of that land up until 1855. And in 1855, he filed an affidavit with the state of Connecticut verifying his identity. The top document is the bona fides for the local justice of the peace in Hartford County.
Okay.
Underneath that is a document made out by that justice of the peace establishing who Eber Holden is and why he has this government land in McDonough County. And what he's done is he ends up giving that land away to a couple. It's noted in the courthouse records as it's part of a dowry. Gives that away in 1855, and within a few months of that land being given to them, that couple then turns and sells that land to either a speculator or somebody here in the county for $900 cash.
So he gave them a dowry of $900, basically, is what he did. This was my gift to you.
Yeah.
Do with it what you will, and they sold it for $900.
Absolutely. That couple...
Think of what that land's worth now.
$900, with most Midwestern land values, $900 probably wouldn't touch half an acre.
No, it wouldn't. No. It wouldn't. And this is really good land. This
Absolutely.
is really good land.
It's beautiful land.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the visit. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
This birthday party features the local Boy Scouts posting colors, speeches by the mayor and by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and also Ukulele Macomb will lead this group in song wishing Major Macomb a happy birthday. With another Illinois Story in Macomb, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.